Hey, Tiffany, welcome to the show and thank you so much for joining.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here talking about one of my favorite subjects, sales. So I can't wait.
Oh, me too. And by the way, listen to a lot of great things that you've done. I loved your What's Next podcast. And I've got to call out, I don't normally do this right off the top, but first of all, I love Growth IQ. So many things I like about it. I'll share something to everybody on the podcast knows this. I'm kind of a nerd. So when you're going to touch on what happened with Marvel, it's going to touch my heart so quickly. It's not even funny, but we've got our first book coming out at the end of July. And when I look through your book, Growth IQ, Get Smarter About the Choices That Will Make or Break Your Business. I just keep coming back to the Seth Godin quote at the beginning, the testimonial at the beginning. He says, a worthy successor to Michael Porter, Bova's book is that rare a gift. It opens with doors with new ideas and new actions. No glib answers here, simply hard-won wisdom that will provoke big changes for the organization, large and small. As soon as somebody gets called a successor to Michael Porter, I think that's going to get people's attention. How did that come to pass? How did you get in connection with Seth? And how much did you pay him for that testimony? Because I'll pay the same for my book. I just need to know what the number is.
Yeah. Well, I didn't pay for it, but Seth is just an amazing human. We met each other all the way back in 2001, I think, right around there. So it's almost been 21 years. He wrote the book, Purple Cow, which is one of my favorite books. And so I hired him literally to come in and do a workshop all the way back then on kind of how to stand out and be a purple cow. And I was working for a web hosting company. I was very early in the World Wide Web, and I had a sales team that was selling, the cloud and selling recurring revenue. And we were selling from a call center. It was all over the phone. And then I was the beta client for Eloqua. We were selling via chat. We were doing lots of things that
Yes.
were sort of new and refreshing, which Seth loves, right? So we struck up a really great, friendship and relationship. And, fast forward sort of, almost 15 years, we ran into each other backstage at an event in Boston in the green room, and we were talking and catching up. And he put his hand on my forearm, and because I was saying, "Hey, I'm thinking I might want to write a book," and he looked me right in the eye and he said, "Look, there are people doing what you're doing right now that are good. You're great. You really need to write this book. You have something to say." And I looked at him and I said, "Look, if Seth Godin says that to you, you sort of have to back up and reassess." And so literally for the next 6 months, that entire conversation just was looping in my head. And so I ended up leaving Gartner. I was a research fellow there covering sales transformation and go-to-market models. I left, and Salesforce was kind enough to offer me an opportunity of a lifetime to just continue doing what I'm doing, write my book, and further the conversation on where sales could go. But when I sent him the final of the book and I got that quote back, it was almost like I didn't care if the book got published at that point. I felt like Seth really it was a full circle moment for me. I am so grateful for everything he's done for me along the years.
Oh, well, just amazing praise. And he's not the only one. You've got some of the top folks in the world. Dan Pink is in there. Everybody loves to sell as human, and the praise is as universal. And not that it matters coming from me, but I just love the book. And there was so many things that, we do a lot of these, and I'm a real lifelong learner, enjoy reading. And one of the things that I always find so interesting about many sales books, and I know it's a tough thing to do, certainly not yours. It always seems like sales books come out with the one thing. They've got the one idea, the one concept, and then it's a great chapter, but it ends up becoming a full book. When we start to look at these growth strategies, it's the 10 growth plans and great examples with the different companies that you bring there. But I love the quote somewhere in the book. I thought it was at the start, but I could be wrong, where you reference that the one thing is never the one thing.
Right.
When you start to figure out, and everybody listening to this is thinking about growing their business and trying to scale, calling out the one thing is never the one thing. I know it's a longer conversation, but tell me a little bit about that one. I think was it the Jeff Bezos quote, or did you quote? Correct me on that if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it was a me quote, but obviously taken from a lot of time and energy and research. And I'm not the only one who said something like that, right?
Right.
So maybe someone said it before me, but that wasn't. I don't think I quoted someone on it. So over the decade at Gartner, I had the opportunity. For those of you who aren't familiar, I'll tell you really quickly. Like we would take inquiry calls from customers. So I might take an inquiry call. It's a half-hour call. They schedule it and it sort of shows up on your calendar. And as an analyst, you sort of dial in, right, and have this call with the customer. Now, it could be somebody saying, I'm about to hire my very first salesperson,
Yeah.
all the way to I have the largest sales organization in the technology sector globally. So, like,
Huh.
literally, you will hang up with one that I'm about to hire my first salesperson, and you pick up the phone for the next one. It's like, I have, 45,000 sellers and I'm trying to figure out so you had this great opportunity over, these conversations to really identify the trends that were happening. Cause all of a sudden
Mm.
you hear commonality in what people were asking, what they were struggling with, and you could test ideas of how to fix it. And then you would hear back from the customer and say, we tried this, it didn't work. We tried that, it worked. And that was my research, was these day in and day out conversations. So over the course of a decade, it was almost 5,000 inquiries, if you will. So it's, almost,
Wow.
couple hundred a year. And then I would do these strategic advisory days where I'd show up for a full day and we would like uncover, here's my go-to-market strategy. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm doing on a global basis. So I'd be in APAC, EMEA, LATAM, North America, wherever it might be. I would tell you that I heard consistently this statement:
Mhm.
we're in a growth stall. So, revenue is slowing. So what do you think we should do, Tiffany? Do you think we should hire more salespeople, spend more marketing dollars, or cut costs? And those tended to be sort of the three I'd hear, right? They're
Mm.
like, look, if we spend more marketing dollars, we would put more in the funnel, which I'm sure is a great idea for you, right? Put more in the funnel, right? The second one is hire more salespeople, because then we know with every head we hire, whatever your numbers are, 30, 60, 90, 120 days, they're going to start to become productive within a year. Maybe they generate whatever that number is, $1 million, half a million,
Right.
whatever it is. So, you could move that dial. I add 5 people, it'll add $2 million, right? I spend $2 million, I can get back whatever from a ROI, from a marketing perspective. And then cut costs is something that I didn't cover in the book. I really focused on top line growth.
Right.
And so probably year 7 of me being an analyst, I realized that it can't just be one of those 3 things. Like there has to be more ways to do it. And then I started to realize that it was never just one thing. It might be hire more salespeople and you need to optimize the way you're selling, because, I'll sort of give one stat to bring that home. And that's why it was an entire chapter in the book. Was the average sellers spend 66% of their time non-selling. And then a little more than 52, 53, 54% of sales teams will miss quota day one.
Mhm.
So the assumption is, well, if I can give them more time to sell, quota should go up. Now, it won't be percent for percent, but you're going to get some goodness. So I said, why would you hire more salespeople into a really bloated, inefficient system?
Right.
And so let's optimize what you have today, while at the same time, right, you're starting to reskill, shore up, hire in. Those things had to happen together. And then the other part of the book was the sequence or order in which you do things. So do you optimize your systems and processes before you hire? Do you hire and then optimize? And so, that's kind of what led me to the 10, right? Because there's lots of ways to grow. Sales is one of them. Salespeople is one of them, but it is not the only.
Well, great. And by the way, I love the approach of really it's explaining what all of us deal with all the time. We're kind of, you've heard the term so many times, we're fixing the plane while we're in the air. And it kind of came in from a meeting that was with a CEO and an executive team just before this podcast, before we recorded, exact same conversation of these different things that we can do. It's never just the one thing. And how do we prioritize, or how do they work in conjunction together to get us to that end game and result? You came across so many of these companies. I think the stat in the book, Tiffany, was 87% of companies at some point in time hit a growth stall. So it's one of these things that I'm sure with your experience and mine at a much more regional level than what you've done, it's the CEOs and these sales leaders, they always think that they're unique or different. We've got this challenge growing the business that's unique to us, but it's so incredibly universal. And I had no idea how universal, frankly, until I saw some of the stats in your book. I've got to ask, and I probably should have started with this, that the great experience when you're running sales organizations in the early days of technology, which was so, first of all, would have been amazingly fun, but incredibly dreamy. I was running teams in those days too, and it was 724, never turn off. Tell me a little bit about this journey and when the gardener going from there to be a research analyst. I'm not sure the order here, but it would seem to be quite a switch. I'd love to know what triggered that.
Yeah, look, I miss selling. I miss the fight. I miss the quota. I miss clubs. I miss customers in that way. I miss solving problems in that way. So I like to say I vicariously get to sell through the sellers I get to meet and, sort of inspire and advise, et cetera. But it was a decision that I made because I was just burnt. Like I had been selling individually, and then I wanted more responsibility, and so I sort of moved up and I became a lead and then I became a manager and then I became a director and then a VP and then territory and then the country and then the world and, that kind of
I'm
thing.
getting tired kind of hearing this, by the way.
And yeah, and it was 724. Like our executive team meetings was on Saturdays. And
Wow.
and I had some surgery and literally, my boss was the CEO at the time, like was calling me, like as I'm getting out of surgery and literally my mom answers the phone. She's like she can't talk to you right now. And so it was all out full court press.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how burnt I was. But what was worse about it in reflection was I didn't realize at the time how much I was asking of my people
Mm,
and how much just because I was burnt out didn't mean they had to be burnt out. But we
right.
were all working so quickly and I was also immature as a leader that I didn't understand my responsibility on mental health, well-being, work-life balance. Those were conversations in sort of the early 2000s we weren't really having in the
Right.
way that we're having it now. I really, in reflection, wonder if I would have done things differently, knowing what I know now, because it was, the last time I carried a quota was all the way back in 2006. And then when I got to Gartner, it really was, I hit the eject button. I said, I literally woke up one day, I looked in the mirror and I said, I don't even recognize myself. I had disconnected from my friends, my family, my life, because I was so heads down on work, 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 work. I had put myself on this hamster wheel. I wanted to be, at the time, Carly Fiorina was the CEO of HP. And I'm like, that's what I want to be, right? I want to be a female CEO of a tech company. And then I realized that it was just sucking every last drop of joy out of my body. Like
Mm,
I was done. So I said, what can I do and do differently? And I hadn't actually realized that over the course of about 15 years, I had changed jobs really frequently, but it gave me exposure to selling hardware, software, services, telco, cloud, global deployments, regional deployments, in verticals, in segments. Like I'd had all this experience. And when I got to Gartner, I realized that that was the plan, that now all of a sudden I could look back and advise leaders, sales, marketing, customer service, because I had run all those divisions. My last job was running a division of gateway computers. If you remember the Holstein pattern
the
boxes.
how
Yeah.
I was just going to say the cow boxes.
Yeah. So I was running a division of gateway and I had everything. I had indirect channels. I'd built their indirect channel business. And the first week I worked at Gartner, this is sort of a fun story. I was in the analyst room. So it's a kickoff. Everyone's on site. We're in Florida. The head of research is on stage. He's, getting everybody fired up and he tells a joke about a philosopher. Number one, I didn't know who the philosopher was. Number two, I didn't get the joke. Right. And I'm like, oh my God, I've made a huge mistake. And then about 2 minutes later, I hear the Rocky theme sort of three doors down and it's the sales kickoff. And I'm like, I'm in the wrong room. Like, that's where I belong. Right. So that transition wasn't easy. Took me a couple years to sort of figure out to get my kind of sea legs underneath me as someone who was advising versus doing. I had been such a doing sort of, individual for
That,
so long that I
yeah,
wasn't doing in that way anymore. And it was a big shift for me competitively, right? Like the quota, the customer, the deal, the win, all of
the
those things,
adrenaline,
all of it, all of
that's
it.
so addicted to it.
Yeah, so that's sort of how that happened, and so, my statement out of everything I just said is to just trust the process. I don't think I knew where I was gonna land,
Right.
but all those learnings along the way led me there, and then I was at Gartner for a full decade, and wow, did I learn a lot about so much, during that time.
And then that journey took you to, obviously, per the intro, just this amazing role with an amazing company today. And tell me a little. I'd really love to hear a little bit. You know, if you're talking about that challenge of being a little bit burned out, and we've all been reading over the last couple of years. We're recording this, during late January 2022. We all know what we've been through for the last couple of years, and all the stats we've been reading about, the mental health of the sales teams and trying to navigate. You talked about putting the pressure on the sales team. I think the sales leaders out there today, boy, do we need guidance on, how much is enough, how much is too much, given what everybody's been through. But it leads me to, I know you've done a lot of work in this area of mental health. You've done some work with a number of different organizations like Uncrushed. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing at Salesforce in terms of helping to manage the mental health of the sales teams, keeping everybody where they need to be, and other places. Tiffany, I think you've got some unique insights into that.
Yeah, I'm actually on the advisory board of Uncrushed, and Tim Clark, a dear friend of mine, started it. He was, with Salesforce, and I'd say this: I'd say that it's been amazing to watch over the last 2 years how sales has actually responded to what's happened. You had a lot of salespeople that were field sellers, and that was kind of the holy grail. Like, I want to be a field seller, or, I moved from inside to outside, or I've always been a field seller and I've never sold inside. And then boom, overnight, everybody was home.
Right.
But what didn't stop was revenue production,
Right.
right? I mean, I'm going to oversimplify, but companies do two things. They make stuff and they sell stuff.
I sure do.
So if you make stuff and you can't sell it, it's a problem.
Mhm.
And so making sure that you could continue to conduct commerce. Now, if you were selling online as well, good for you, but not everybody is able to sell what they do online. Nor do all companies have that as an online strategy. I mean, you could pick Cisco as an example, massive organization, Fortune 50 probably. You can't buy Cisco stuff online. It's not possible. So not everybody has that model. So you need to remember that at the end of that sort of, the tip of that spear is a human who now all of a sudden has the responsibility of keeping the lights on and keeping everybody employed and bringing revenue in the door. And yet they're totally, sort of, what's the right word? They're just unsure of how to actually approach the situation. I have to have empathy as a seller. Now my customers I were selling to, their doors are closed. They may not stay open. They've been completely decimated by this, right? And so a deal I had been working is gone because of no, you know, sort of mistake on my part or the customer's part, right? It was this black swan event sort of thing. So McKinsey had done some research that April 2020 all the way to November of 2021 in seeing how effective sellers were in the eyes of customers doing what they were doing remotely.
Mhm.
And it went from being not very effective to actually being more effective virtually than they were face to face pre pandemic.
Right.
That says a lot about the people who have a role of a seller of, I got to learn how to do it on Zoom. How am I engaging? How do I add value, not face to face? How do I do all the things I need to do without sitting in a room with the 10 people who are making decision? How do I get everybody on a Zoom call? I'm burnt. They're burnt. Everyone is sort of unsure of where the future is going to land. So, I would say that it's been great to see the resilience from the sales organizations, but also from leaders and companies to say, hold on a second, we need to make sure we're taking care of our people. Because if they're burnt out and they disengage, it's bad for them, but it's also bad for us. But we have to look at it through the lens of our employees. So from a Salesforce perspective, we did no meeting Thursdays. We did wellness Fridays once a month. We changed meetings from 30 minutes to 20 minutes, on, Google Calendar, or, Zoom meetings will end at 25 minutes. And we did a lot of things to try to give time back.
Yeah.
And then, really advise people to block time out of every day where they can go for a walk. This is sort of early days. And now we've learned so much from it, on the tools and the systems and collaboration and how you really maintain that. But I'd say that nothing is as important as our people.
Yeah.
I mean, companies are a combination of people. As Tom Peters says, there is nothing else besides business besides people. So making sure you take care of them. So if you're a sales manager, sales leader listening to this, like, check in with your people all the time. Make sure you spend 3 or 5 minutes at the front or back end of every one-on-one, every forecast call, to ask people how they're doing and have them have a safe environment where they can share, or you set up external resources for them to be able to go, if they're really struggling.
How critically important. And, we're in Toronto, Tiffany. So up in Canada, and right now we're in lockdown again. So we're just coming out of it, but so we're back to used to, working remotely. And, as you've spoken about on lots of your podcasts, when you guests on other folks' podcasts, lots of people talking about it, we'll be in this situation. I'm not saying, in lockdown, but we'll certainly be in a situation where there's going to be less face to face than there was before. There was the McKinsey research. The buyers were coming back saying, 75% of them are preferring, in many cases, the Zoom call and the video call versus the face to face. We may be spending less on travel, of course. A lot of large organizations take a look at this and said, hey, maybe we don't need to be jumping on a plane all the time. We want to enable our people with productivity. Maybe windshield time starts to go dramatically down. So I think we all have to continue to think through, if I've got a different work environment, I'm in a different scenario, I'm not traveling around getting that contact, that live contact. How do I stay engaged all day? And I love those tips about, hey, we'll make the meeting 10 minutes short and go get a walk outside.
Yeah, and I would tell you that I started talking about this kind of May, June of 2020, that I called it rules of engagement, and Salesforce now we call it flex agreements, but really understanding, okay, when is it appropriate for you to ask an employee to go visit a customer face to face or to do it virtually? What are the rules? What are the rules? Like, is it a dollar amount? Is it where it is in the deal? Is it, the customer's on fire, right? Like, I mean, what is the reason that you would say this warrants a face-to-face visit? Now, I'm not talking about when you're in lockdown or outside of, what you're supposed to be doing. I'm just talking about, like, when we get generally.
Yeah.
And it used to be, it's always face-to-face first, digital second, right? Now it's digital first and face-to-face second. And will it stay that way? And so understanding when you would go face-to-face versus when you would be digital, what are those rules of engagement? And if you're going to go face-to-face, what are the rules? Like, do you say, if my person, if you're going to show up and I'm your manager, I'm going to be like, look, there can be no more than 3 people in the room. Everyone has to wear masks. Is everyone vaccinated? Whatever the rules are, so that then you can say, hey, listen, I'm coming. Here are things that my company requires. Like, it can only be 3 people. Everyone has to be vaccinated or test negative. I'll come in and test negative, whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
But having those rules makes them feel that health and safety is a priority for you, for them, and also for your customers. So you may say, look, we just don't care. Well, that's your choice, right? Or you may go, what I just said. And so, we have an event coming up, our company kickoff, with a couple thousand people in New York, in like 2 weeks. And this is really a test for us, right? Everyone has to test 48 hours in advance, and you have to test the night before. We have to test every morning before we all get together. Everybody has to wear masks. We're having it in a big, convention center. And, the rules are, can't go out to dinner after, can't get together in the bar, like, order food in your hotel, like, very specific rules of what we need to do.
Wow.
Because if we can get to a place where you can successfully have a safe way to get people back together, especially for someone like us, where we're big on events, that is a good thing. And then,
Mm,
but the other thing is we also said, if you were invited, you don't have to say yes. If you're not comfortable, stay home. We can watch remote. The whole company's watching remote. But if you want to come, here's the protocols. And I mean, it's been really rigorous, uploading vaccination, doing testing, sending out kits, sending out masks, like all the rules, like you have to really be engaged and committed to making sure that we all do what we're supposed to do. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And so I think that those are just some examples of, if you're going to put your people back out in the field, that you make sure you find out from them what they feel comfortable doing. Because you can't say go. If you're not going to go, you have to quit or I'm going to fire you. Like,
right, right.
that's not the approach.
Hey, what great leader for everybody listening. What great guidance. As usual, Salesforce kind of leading the way. So I think lots of folks can learn from that approach. We had a client or two attend the National Retail Federation had a big event in New York 2 weeks ago. So a lot of our clients sell technology into large retailers. And it was the same type of thing. It was a very well run event from what we heard from those who participated. They felt safe and there was a lot of protocols in place. Now the attendance, it was about a quarter of what it had been, last year or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but certainly steps in the right direction. And
Yeah, we actually launched a product
did you?
called Safety Cloud for this reason. So everything gets uploaded into Safety Cloud, so that you can track the testing, where they were, what sessions they signed up for. So if you were in a session and someone tested positive in that session, it would communicate out to people who were in that session. We use it for our own, buildings and towers. So we have to be part of a cohort, either pre-tested or vaccinated, because not everybody feels comfortable getting vaccinated. And so, if you're on the fourth floor, because of your badge, we know you were on 4, someone tested positive on 6, you don't get a notification, kind of a thing, right? And if you were on 6. And so it was a way early on, Mark Benioff, our co-CEO, gave all of us a challenge to have 1 million conversations with customers.
Oh, great.
This was sort of June of 2020. And we had 1.5 million. And then Mark said, I must have done it too low. So he said 5 million. And now I think we're well over 7 million. But through those conversations, so it was, what were the jobs to be done that customers needed from us? And at that time, it was getting people back to the office safely.
Hmm.
So we then said, okay, what products do we already have that are scheduling? Oh, our Service Cloud does that. What do we have around contacting and contact customer employee information? Well, Sales Cloud can do that. And how do we, so we sort of put things together. We launched something called work.com. And now this product is sort of the evolution of that. But this now will be part of, are you going to have meetings in the office? Are you going to have events? You want to get together? You want to get with your clients? Like, this is a way for people to do it safely.
Oh, great idea. The other thing that really jumps out, if you think of the beginning of these turbulent times, I think everybody was paralyzed. So where most sales organizations weren't thinking it was the right time to reach out. To have Mark Benioff come back and say, actually, I want 1.5 million conversations. By the way, we're not trying to pitch products at somebody. We're not trying to sell. Actually, we're trying to engage them because clearly, and even still, I think our clients and prospects, they need the help and guidance we can provide them more than they've ever needed them before. So as long as you can add value, as long as you can have that great conversation with them, they need help. Now that we're a couple of years into this, we're getting back to a little bit of expectations are going back to business as usual in terms of business performance. So we might have had a little leeway as our clients and prospects in terms of where they were trying to get in the early days, but now we actually have to get business results. And all of us as sellers, all we're trying to do is help our clients achieve their desired outcomes. So they need us now more than ever.
Yeah, we actually broke it down into 3 different kind of work streams. One was stabilize the business, to your point, right? And in your example, you're back on lockdown. You're now stabilize again. So you come in and out of each of these phases, right? One is stabilize. The next was back to work. And in that description, we don't mean that you're not working when you're home. It means kind of back to work, back to the office in that
Right.
case. But in some cases, it was back to work. Because if you think about the early days, if you had a inside sales call center or a customer service call center with desktops and people showed up every day, and then all of a sudden the office is locked and they don't have laptops to take home and they don't have access to all the equipment, they're not working.
Right.
So back to work was Remember, this is sort of 2020. And then the third is back to growth. But we sort of are flexing between these around the world. Melbourne was in the longest lockdown. So they were in this constant sort of stabilize, back to work mode. You're back in lockdown in Toronto. And so if you think about it that way, then what are your behaviors in each of them? So when you go into lockdown again, or if something like that happens, what do sellers have to do? Now you need to be more empathetic. Your messaging and communication should shift, and this should happen and that should happen. And then if your customer's like, okay, right, we're getting back to the office, we're getting back now, it shifts again. And if they're like, we're back to growth mode, it's in our rearview mirror, we feel like we see light at the end of the tunnel, then your behaviors are different. You cannot have the same behaviors when your customers are going in and out of those different phases of what we're all experiencing.
Right. Let's talk about that as we shift over now, Tiffany, about the future. That was a little bit of the past. And again, hopefully here in Canada, fingers crossed, nobody's got the crystal ball, but hopefully in the not too distant future, they have planned to get us back to where we need to be. So that'll be taking place. Let's talk about, I think you've got kind of a unique line of sight, given what you do professionally and the organization you do it with. Tell me a little bit about some of the top trends that you are seeing in professional sales moving forward. So if we start to think of what are these key things influencing, how we do what we do in order to continue to improve our business discipline, what are you speaking about typically these days? And it could be some stuff in the state of sales report, which is always fantastic from Salesforce.
So here's what I'd say. The first thing is one I've been talking about for some time, and that is this human and tech relationship. Having been a seller who had, ran her business with a Rolodex on my desk and, an Excel spreadsheet, Word Perfect, and some Post-it notes, and then a single user version of Act, and then a single user version of Goldmine. And then I was one of the beta clients for Salesforce. I can tell you that I always relied on technology. That was me, because I felt like it would allow me to do what I wanted to do, which was sell and engage with customers. And if I could get that to sort of pick up some of that busy work. Now, this is 1996, 97. I mean, the first time I was trained on solution selling was 1997. So we're still here. We're still here. And so I remember it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, Dreamforce, we made this announcement around insight selling and Einstein or automation and artificial intelligence underneath saying, okay, Mr. and Miss Salesperson, don't just call 100 people today, call these 10 because they're more likely to do something with you.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, they're more likely to do something with you. And here's what you should pitch to them. Here's the positioning. Here's the white paper. Here's the talk track. Here's everything you need. And oh, by the way, we're going to listen to your conversation so that we can track, are you talking too much? Are they talking too much? Are you doing all these things? We're going to give you real-time coaching and feedback. And I was sitting in the audience listening to this. And just for about 90 seconds, I was like, oh my God, I need to get back into sales. I think I'm going to get back into sales because I would blow my quota out with an Excel spreadsheet, bubble gum, and a Post-it note.
Right.
Imagine what I could do with AI, machine learning, and intelligence, and all the power behind what CRM now has today, specifically a Salesforce. And then I went, oh yeah, no, I can't do that. I think those days are over for me. But I would say that human and tech, not human alone, not tech alone, that is sort of the holy grail. Now, some sellers are, well, is technology going to replace me? And I remember another analyst firm came out with a prediction that 1 million salespeople would lose their jobs because of AI. I didn't believe it then. I don't believe it now. We've actually seen selling organizations that use AI in the most efficient and effective way are hiring more people because you get that goodness, right? You get that goodness of they're spending more time selling, they're more achieving quota. It's more profitable.
On a return. I get a return on the investment.
I get a return, right? So human in tech is one that salespeople, and some of this is sales management and leadership, have to view technology as I couldn't imagine showing up to my job and opening my laptop and not having it.
Right.
It has to be that integral to what they do. And if that's not how you feel, then you either have to make a commitment to learn how to get technology to use that, work that way for you, give feedback to your own organization, like whatever you need to do, that's the feeling it should be. The second is, if I'm really pushing the envelope, is how do we start to look at things selling to things, right? IoT, and especially in manufacturing, in the supply chain, blockchain, where there is no human, that the machine knows it needs more, widgets. So it orders it, a supplier just sends the widgets and no human is in there. How do you conduct commerce in this very connected world? And it's not that humans go away, but now all of a sudden, if that happens, now the human is responsible for the relationship, not necessarily the transactional commodity sale that has to happen. So, I like that. And I also really like the whole sort of next best action for sellers,
Yeah.
really letting technology capture the data, analyze that data, give insights to the seller. And then the trick is the seller has to trust the data. Will it be 100% right all the time? No. But the more you trust it, the more you invest in getting data in an automated way, the more you spend the time putting data in, the smarter the technology will get, the more efficient and effective you will become. And oh, by the way, this is not about squeezing more productivity out of you,
Right.
right? That's not what this is about. And if you're a manager who just keeps increasing the productivity metrics and using technology to look over the shoulder of your sellers, you're missing the point. Like, that's a lack of trust. That's not actually giving empowerment and enablement to your sellers to do what they think is best and right, because that's what it's all about. Those are sort of the three that I like to talk the most about. I mean, we can get into all these technology. Is it VR and AR? Is it, the meta? What is it? There's a lot of other things, but those are three that I think individual sellers, managers, and leaders can really start to think about.
Well, it's such a great theme, Tiffany. I think all three of those discussion points are so relevant. By the way, I couldn't help but smile. I am old enough to remember Acton Goldmine. And so I just love the fact that anybody else remembers Acton Goldmine back in those days. And what was so true in those days, and I think it got lost for a little while, but it's so true again now, was nobody else was inspecting when I had an Actor Goldmine. It wasn't enterprise software. It was on my device. So I leveraged it because it was a helpful productivity tool. It was something that actually helped me be more productive. And I like the way you've talked about it goes slightly contradictory, your positioning on technology and sales. Obviously, Tony Hughes and Justin Michael and their book Tech Powered Sales. But there is a constant theme that aligns with what you're saying, which is we still, we can leverage lots of technology for intent data and trigger events, and then actual online coaching AI to assess how did that conversation go? Why wouldn't we leverage those things to get better? But what I like about that book and the combination of those two, they were on the show a couple of weeks back. Tony still brings to the table that whole conversation that we have to be able to engage a client in a meaningful conversation to add value. That's never going to go away. Right now, technology is not going to do that for us. We have to add insight and value and expertise.
Well, I'd say this: we do not have a technology problem. We have a people process problem.
Mhm.
And so it's not lost on me. I work at Salesforce. Of course, I wouldn't say we have a technology problem.
Yeah.
But let me qualify that for a moment. I'm going to go back once again to 2000 when I was, running this sales team in this thing called the World Wide Web. And there was maybe a dozen marketing technology products back then, maybe.
Mm,
Eloqua being kind of one of the first.
right.
Like I said, I was the beta client of Eloqua. I was the beta client for Constant Contact. I mean, it was a really different time. So let's say that there was a dozen. Okay, today, Scott Brinker probably tracks 9,000 marketing technology products. Okay, so the answer is, do we have a technology problem? Well, I don't think so. We've split the hair 9,000 ways.
Right.
You want to do this journey mapping. You want to do this, lead qualification. You want to do this just-in-time coaching. You want to do listening. There's apps for everything. But the average enterprise has 900 apps and only about 27% of them are integrated. So that is not an app problem. That is a process problem, right? There's no integration between them.
What's that? What was that stat again?
So the average enterprise has about 900 apps, not just for marketing and sales, but just all up, right?
Okay.
And only about, this is a MuleSoft stat, and only about 27% of them are integrated.
Mm,
So I'm a salesperson, right? And I have to go look for information. I have to go three places. And oh, this one says something totally different than this one. And then let's talk, that's sort of that lack of technology integration. So we have the technology, but it's not integrated. So that's not a technology problem. It's an integration problem, right?
mhm.
The other would be there might be 8 steps in the sales cycle. Like, oh my God, like 8 steps? Like, really? Like, that's a process problem. And if you
Right.
look at journey mapping of the buyer, we're making it so complicated. And then people maybe you have an account-based marketing team sitting in marketing. You got customer success and customer service selling out of the customer service organization. You've got sellers selling out of the sales organization, and nobody is aligned with metrics. And that's a process of people problem. So there's a lot of things that I think if you're listening to this and you're in sales, you're sort of like going, yes, as you're listening, because it's like, why do we do these really stupid things? Why don't we do it this way? And so that's why I say that this is not tech. It's about people and process. So if you have the ability to do a, inventory, look at how you go through it. What do you make your sellers do to close a deal? What do you make your sellers do to get a price quote or a price reduction or a discount? What do you make your people do to get a refund or whatever it is? And really making sure that you're constantly optimizing those actions, because the disconnection between technology and teams results in a horrible customer experience. And more importantly, a terrible employee experience. And if your employees aren't happy, your customers aren't going to be happy. So there are ways in which don't just throw people at it. Don't just throw technology at it. Like, you really have to figure out, why am I doing it? How will this help? And more importantly, how will my employees and customers benefit from whatever it is that you're doing?
I know we're running a little tight on time here. A couple of questions and a little bit a different approach, but your energy and enthusiasm for this topic is absolutely contagious. And you start to think of perhaps some young people today thinking about finishing an MBA and then thinking about a career potentially. Well, where they're going to go first is either finance or consulting. And generally, that's what's coming out of MBAs. Some of them into sales. In your view, Tiffany, why is, you look at your career, which has been spectacular. Why is sales such a great path or a professional pursuit? Well, if you were a young person today, why would this be a great business discipline to jump into in your view?
Oh, I'm totally bullish on being in sales. I don't have my MBA in anything. So I don't have an MBA. There isn't one for sales. There's one for marketing.
Hmm.
Once again, businesses do two things. They make stuff and they sell stuff. So they got a lot of MBAs and a lot of teaching and a lot of schooling on making stuff and building businesses. And then sales is sort of this 4-letter word in business.
Yeah.
So now it's chief revenue officer or it's chief customer officer. But, if you show up at home and go, Mom, I'm super excited. I've decided I want to make a career in sales. They're sort of like selling cars. Like,
Right. Exactly.
what do you want to do? Right.
Stereotypes still exist out there.
Still exists. So I think that it's an amazing profession. It gets you exposure to meet all kinds of amazing and fascinating people. If you are in the business of selling technology, I don't believe we sell tech. I believe we sell change. And then you're at the tip of the spear of helping businesses really be successful. You're sort of guiding them to where that could be. It's super fulfilling. I mean, you can make a lot of money in selling, which that's great, but I think it's also personally very fulfilling. And so I was an athlete my whole life. And so I loved competition. And so sales was a way I could continue sort of feeding that blood. And that's the one thing, when I said I really miss it, like I miss that the most. I miss that sort of ability to feel like I did something and I won against the competition. Um, but I also believe you have to be a student of your profession. Sales is not one thing. You have to be a great communicator, an amazing listener. You have to be empathetic. You have to be willing to challenge yourself to learn new things, learn industries, how to overcome objections. Like, there's so many things you have to do in a given day. But if you just sort of rest on your laurel and go, I'm really good at it, I don't need to, do anything else. You've missed the opportunity to always advance yourself personally and stay curious and invest in yourself. Because if you don't, no one else will. So if you are in sales and you love what you're doing, I'd say find ways to keep honing your craft. and finding things that are your superpower when it comes to sales. And then if it's not your superpower, either automate it, offload it, partner with someone to help you do it. But if you can uncover that, it's just a really fulfilling career.
Are we trusting that list you ran through? I heard a great author write once, the one thing is never the one thing.
That is correct. That is correct.
Hey, Tiffany, what a great treat talking to you today. So first and foremost, thank you so much for making time for us today, folks. Anybody who hasn't read Growth IQ, get smarter about the choices that will make and break your business. You will enjoy reading this book as well as learning from it. So I highly encourage you to continue that lifelong learning that Tiffany was speaking of, and her book's a very good starting point. In addition to that, and assuming hopefully some of us can come and see you in San Francisco in September, October at Salesforce, how else can people get in, at Dreamforce, how else can people get in touch with you, Tiffany?
I'm really active on social media. So follow me at Tiffany_Bova on Twitter, or follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm Tiffani Bova, Facebook, Tiffani Bova, YouTube, Tiffani Bova. It's sort of easy. But I'm also really interested in hearing feedback. This is an opportunity where it's a one-way conversation because it's a podcast. But if you hear something that really resonated with you or you didn't agree with, let me know. Give me a note on LinkedIn. I'm always open to hearing what's happening in the field because, as I said, I'm not in the field anymore in that way. But I would say one last thing about my book is that I wrote a book I would want to read. I have a super short attention span. I'm not going to read a 275-page book. And so I wrote it in a way that was very approachable, specifically for people who are moving really fast and don't have a lot of time and maybe don't read books all the time like you do, Mark, right? I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's an opportunity for you to expand your thinking on how to actually grow your own business and or your own portfolio, or grow, as an employee and a person.
Hey, Tiffany, thank you again for joining. I'm going to look forward to speaking to you again, hopefully in the future, but thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for having me.